Good morning, right. Good morning, everyone. Thanks, everybody, for coming out. It's not every day that we get to inaugurate a new Muni line, let alone a rail line, let alone a rail line on which historic streetcars will be operating. So we couldn't be more excited to be out here today. We've got a lot of folks here without whom we wouldn't be here today. So very special day for Muni, very special day in the history of transit in San Francisco, and just a great day for our city. And I'll just start by saying a lot of people have to work hard for a long time to make something like this happen. But really at the top of that ladder is our mayor, who from the time he took office and really from his decades in the city and supporting infrastructure and supporting good capital planning, the kinds of things that you need to have in place to be able to get to a point like this. The mayor has really been a leader in supporting transportation in this city. A couple years ago, he convened a transportation task force that led in part to a $500 million bond that was approved by the voters last November. Just this week, he signed a city budget that, among many other great things that it's bringing to the city, included a service increase, of which the E line is a part. So that's the kind of leadership we need to bring the kind of transit service we need to the city to help it continue to thrive and grow in the future. So please join me in welcoming our Mayor, Ed Lee.
Well, good morning as well. Thanks, Ed, for your leadership at the MTA. And if I can just take a minute to thank you, to thank the commissioners at SF Transportation Agency and also our County Transportation Authority, all working together with our city and our Board of Supervisors. And I'm really glad to be here today with Supervisor Christensen, Supervisor Scott Wiener, of course, Supervisor Kim, joining all of us. We're all dedicated to improving, expanding our public transportation, and this is yet the best example. I got to ride just now on the newest addition to our historic streetcars, and Rick, thank you again, Rick Lausch at the historic streetcars history. You just provide that connection. We were talking about all the other mayors from Feinstein on that have really led this effort, and I know from Mimi Silbert to Art Agnos and Senator Feinstein and others, so many people wanted to link the entire Embarcadero. Well, this morning I'm here to dispel any rumors that the E line is rumored to be the Ed line. Just wanted to say it's the E line, Embarcadero. F line is also not Feinstein line, but it's all the alphabet here. But there are names here, and I want to say I know the senator wanted to be here, and I know representatives of Senator Feinstein and Senator Boxer are here as well, who've been just fantastic partners, not only this, but so many other things that help our city become very successful. I personally wanted to ride this with Senator Feinstein because I know that's been at her heart to make sure this got done. She's, of course, been a great leader in the past as mayor to do the cable cars, all the other alternative things that hopefully Rick will have a chance to talk with all of you about the history of this. But this is just a remarkable day that we can exemplify what an additional 10% of service means, at least in one part. We've got extensions of lines and more service in other neighborhoods in the city. But for this Embarcadero to have this E line go all the way from AT&T Park all the way to Fisherman's Wharf on a seamless way and have an open air approach to it, and then have Muni drivers that got the history like Robert Parks, who just drove us up here, working for Muni since 1997, and I think enjoying every year that he's had here to serve the public. You've got a whole system of people, whether they're parking control officers, our police department, our Muni staff and management, our commissioners, working with our federal partners, working with our Board of Supervisors, state agencies and county agencies, all working to improve this. This is why we have confidence that our Muni can have a $1 billion operation budget that really cares for getting people around this entire city. They can manage that and certainly help me manage all the things that we need to do to get people around, visitors, residents, people working here, friends and family, safely and efficiently through the rest of the city. This is going to be one of the most enjoyable rides. These boat cars are historic. This car comes from England. I won't mess with all the other news that everybody has more details than I do. But I will say that when you have an uncovered vehicle that has a lot of history to it, riding along the Embarcadero, it's fun. It's exhilarating. It is really another kind of cable car experience of San Francisco. And I love that history of our city. And I'll work and continue to work to make sure these things can happen and that services are increased, that we reduce congestion. I'm working really hard on that, but also that we make sure Vision Zero is all part of everything that we do. This $500 million bond that our public passed, we are working really hard to make sure every one of those Vision Zero projects are done. And I know Muni is in the lead of that, but there's so many other agencies, Public Works, and everybody else has to work in high levels with that as well. But let's celebrate this new service, this new line. Let's link it to the history of not only the car, the fun it will have, but all the appreciation that I have of the mayors and the leaders and the commissioners that have gone before us and the supervisors all working together to make sure this is part of the great public transportation system we want to have in our great city, linking history, celebrating that past, but moving forward, as the coined phrase from Muni is always about forward Muni, how we can serve even more of the public, get pride in this system so that everybody works for each other. Congratulations, SFMTA. Congratulations, County Transportation. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Hope you get a ride on this as much as you can. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Certainly we wouldn't be here today without your leadership. The leadership at City Hall really extends across the second floor. The Board of Supervisors have continued to provide both policy and funding leadership that support things like bringing the E line to fruition. But the mayor made reference to there's been a long-standing demand for the folks who ring the bay here along the Embarcadero for this kind of service, for service that provides the connectivity from the Caltrain station by the ballpark all the way up through Pier 39, Fisherman's Wharf, and into the northern part of the bay. The two supervisors who represent those stakeholders are joining us here, and they have both been steady voices for better transportation in San Francisco, better transportation service. I was called into a meeting 3 or 4 years ago, somewhere here along the Embarcadero, and neighborhood leaders, institutional leaders from along this corridor a demand for, or expressing the demand for this kind of service. And so the grassroots leadership that manifests in the supervisors who represent Districts 3 and 6 are really a part of why we're here today. So first, representing the northern half of the E line route, want to bring up someone who, even before she came to office, has been a staunch advocate for better transportation for northeast of San Francisco. Since she's been in office, has really focused a lot, among other things, on transportation issues and on improving transportation. So please join me in welcoming District 3 Supervisor Julie Christensen.
Good morning. My first thanks are to Rick Laubscher and Bruce Agid and the leaders and the volunteers of the Market Street Railway. I came out of advocacy, and I can tell you this is a 20-year project waiting to happen, so congratulations to the Market Street Railway for an insightful and determined effort to make this happen. We owe them a lot. I'm grateful to Mayor Ed Lee and to a succession of mayors going back to then Mayor Feinstein for supporting this wonderful and crazy idea, and to Ed Riskin and Tilly Chang and all the folks in the city family who've worked so hard to make this happen. This is a great thing for the city. This is going to be a lot of fun riding along the waterfront, but I'd like to focus a little bit on District 3. My district includes some of the densest neighborhoods in the United States. We have a topography, sort of a roller coaster topography that is both our charm and our challenge. Most of my constituents don't own cars, and so we're constantly trying to improve public transportation for District 3. I'm thrilled as I can be that very soon our district will have the first subway in San Francisco and the first bus rapid transit system in San Francisco, and I'm delighted to welcome the E line. And as charming and wonderful and fun as it will be, for my constituents, this is very serious business. Not only do we have these dense neighborhoods, but District 3 welcomes every day tens of thousands of shoppers to Union Square, workers to the financial district, tourists who are visiting Fisherman's Wharf and Chinatown and other places in the district. They need to get around. And this transportation on the east side is vitally important, not only to get people back and forth to work and appointments, but to make sure that our city continues to run smoothly. So we're very excited about this addition in service. I've been quoting lately the former mayor of Bogota, Enrique Peñalosa, who said that the mark of a great city is not when poor people can drive, it's when rich people take mass transit. So this puts us on that step. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Christensen. Representing the southern end of the E-Line district is Supervisor Jane Kim, who has been, as most folks know, one of the leading voices in terms of making our streets safer, really was behind getting Vision Zero to San Francisco, Vision Zero being our goal to eliminate traffic fatalities in San Francisco by 2024. But representing the folks who probably have among the lowest levels of car ownership and the highest levels of transit ridership, she's also been a very strong voice for improving transit, including recently really pushing us to engage with the east side of her district, the folks right here, to extend and improve transit service for the east side of her district, including the E-Line. So please join me in welcoming Supervisor Jane Kim.
Thank you. I was going to say that actually Supervisor Christensen and I have a lot in common. I do also represent another very dense part of the city that is absorbing 60% currently of all the residential construction here in San Francisco is all taking place right here. And for years, our residents have been asking for more public transit lines to ensure that we have the infrastructure to ensure that our neighborhood is connected to many others. I really want to recognize some of our residents who for years have been advocating for the E-Line. The chair of the Market Street Railway, Bruce Agid, who couldn't be here today because he is serving our city by going to jury duty at 9:30 a.m. today. He was heartbroken that he couldn't be here. Corinne Woods from the Mission Bay CAC, and also Dr. Mimi Silbert from Delancey Street Foundation, who have been pushing to make sure the E-Line happen. And it just makes me so proud that we were delivering on that line today. Director Riskin mentioned it's not often that you have a new line in the city, and our district has two. The 55, which is connecting the Mission neighborhood and BART to Mission Bay, along with the UCSF Medical Campus and the soon-to-be Kaiser Medical Office Building, and now the E-Line, which will connect Fisherman's Wharf all the way down to the Giants Ballpark and Caltrain Station. Transit is incredibly important. As we grow and we become more dense as a city, we know that everyone can't continue to drive. We have to make our streets safer for pedestrians and for cyclists, but we also have to make sure that we have options for our residents, not just to get to the downtown core, of which many of our lines go to, but that we're also crisscrossing and connecting a lot of different neighborhoods. This was a huge effort, and it's nice to not just talk about it or promise that it's going to come soon, but to actually say that we're going to be opening it today. So congratulations to the Market Street Railway. Congratulations to SFMTA, the mayor's office, and it's going to be great to have a line connecting our two districts, Supervisor Christensen. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Kim. As many of you know, the Board of Supervisors also sits as the Transportation Authority, the County Transportation Authority Commission. The mayor referenced, we're joined. I want to acknowledge their Executive Director, Tilly Chang, who's been a great planning and funding partner for us. And the TA is currently chaired by Scott Wiener, who also sits on the Metropolitan Transportation Commission as a very strong voice in the region for transit and transportation, particularly looking out for San Francisco's needs. But here locally has also been one of the strongest voices for transportation from his advocacy back in 2011 for the streets bond, up until last year, supporting both the GEO bond, but also bringing Prop B, which increased the general fund set aside that goes to Muni. Wouldn't have been there without his leadership. He's really been a staunch supporter and sometimes constructive critic of transit. He rides it every day, so like many of us, he really experiences both the challenges but also sees the opportunities for the system. So please join me in welcoming from District 8, Supervisor and Chairman of the Transportation Authority Commission, Scott Wiener.
Thank you, Ed. And my district does not include the E line, but it does include the end of the F line. So it's all one integrated system for our historic streetcars. You know, sometimes in San Francisco we have this tension between the city's past and history and where we're moving in the future. And the E line really, in my mind, is a perfect blend of the past and the future. It's really wonderful to be able to preserve and use these wonderful historic streetcars. And I want to give all the credit in the world to the Market Street Railway and to Senator Feinstein and others for really saving these streetcars and saving this whole system along with the cable cars to make sure that as the city changes and grows, we don't just jettison some of these treasures that we have as a city. But this line is not just about cherishing the past. It's also about moving us to the future. You know, as the city grows, we've been talking a lot, as we should, about the impacts on housing and the cost of housing. But the congestion in the city and the wear and tear and strain on our public transportation system as we grow by 10,000 people a year is something that until recently we had not been focusing on enough. And we are growing significantly, especially in this part of town, and we need to have more and more and more transit capacity and more parts of the city that are connected by transit. And particularly the Mission Bay area, as Supervisor Kim has mentioned, is an area that's just exploding and doesn't have nearly enough transit access. And so the fact that we have these tracks in the ground, that we have these vehicles, that we have this line, and weren't really making the best use of it was just a shame. And so to be able to actually activate this entire area and to utilize these vehicles to connect Mission Bay to the northern neighborhoods is just tremendous. And it's only the beginning. I know we have more and more expansion of our transit system to go. And the voters have been really, really clear between adopting and renewing our half-cent sales tax for transit to overwhelmingly passing the Muni bond last year, to overwhelmingly passing Prop B, which ties transit funding to population growth. The voters get it and City Hall gets it, and we're going to keep doing this. I also just want to note that our County Transportation Authority, which administers the half-cent sales tax, has invested $19 million in the historic streetcars. And so this is really a team effort. And so congratulations to everyone, and particularly congratulations to the residents and to everyone else who are going to benefit from this service. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Wiener and the rest of the Board of Supervisors. It really, as he said, is a team effort, and we wouldn't be here if it weren't for everybody working together on this. A little bit closer to the ground, in order to make something like historic streetcars available and rehabilitated, in order to be able to find the resources to be able to expand service so that we can do things like open the line, there are a lot of tough decisions that have to get made in terms of the overall MTA budget and the direction that we're going in terms of executing our strategic plan. And those tough decisions are made by our Board of Directors. We're governed by a 7-member board. Folks that are appointed by the mayor serve essentially without compensation, but have the huge responsibility for guiding transportation forward in this city. And we've been, I think, very lucky over, at least certainly from my tenure, and I think before that, in having great leadership at our Board of Directors. So it's with great pleasure that I welcome up the chairman and the vice chair of our board to say a few words. Please join me in welcoming Tom Nolan and Cheryl Brinkman.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the Board of Supervisors. Really happy to be here on behalf of the Board of Directors of the MTA. We're enormously proud of what we do every day. 700,000 people move around this city thanks to the MTA, and this is a wonderful, great addition. I want to mention 2 people, one who is not here but is here in spirit, that'd be Cam Beach. I never think of historic rail cars without thinking of Cam Beach, who was our colleague, died several years ago. Carmen Clark is over here, so thank you. He's a great inspiration to us all. And also, I want to say about Ed Riskin, we are so fortunate, this city, the area is so fortunate to have a man of his talent and dedication working so hard and so effectively for it. Lots of great things are happening. And Director Riskin, thank you for your leadership in that. Vice Chair Brinkman?
Thank you. I think the chairman said it all. I will just echo what everyone else said. Nothing in this city happens just by the result of one person's actions or even one agency or organization, and this is another example of that. So I look forward to riding the E-Line. That boat car was some of the most fun I've ever had on public transit, so thank you.
Thank you. The political leadership behind Muni and behind the E-Line expands far and wide. The mayor made reference to both U.S. senators. We have representatives from Senator Boxer's office here today. Of course, Senator Feinstein really was one of the chief architects of this and is part of what makes this possible. We also are joined today by former supervisor and board president, current Assembly member David Chu's staff, Judson True, also Muni alumni. So just want to acknowledge him and the Assembly member, the support that we get from the state, including a recent $41 million award of state cap and trade funds to expand our light rail fleet, is part of how we're continuing to grow service in San Francisco. So we've heard from a lot of the folks in the government, but I think without question, next to Dianne Feinstein, that there's no person who is as both personally and professionally responsible for us being here today than Rick Laubscher. This has been a passion of his, both in his professional time and a lot on his own time over decades. That is part of why we're here today. So please join me in welcoming the president of the Market Street Railway Association, Rick Laubscher.
Well, we know this is a team sport. In fact, San Francisco is a team sport, and I could spend all day just talking about everyone who has been involved in this activity, and they've been named by many. It's all true. You don't do anything alone in this city, and the leadership of the mayor, the leadership of Ed Riskin and Tom Nolan and Cheryl Brinkman at SFMTA are extremely important to the things we have happening for the better in our transportation system. I want to acknowledge the Market Street Railway board members, past and present. Would you put your hands up, please? Let them see who we have here. You're surrounded by them. These folks have given thousands and thousands of hours of volunteer time over decades to help make what you see here happen. You know, if you stood in this spot 30 years ago, you would have been in the shadows. We would have been directly under a double-deck freeway. The entire waterfront, had transitioned away from its maritime history, but we did not know yet what it was going to be. There were a few people who had the vision to say this can be a better place, a world-class waterfront. And I want to acknowledge one in particular. He can't be here today because he passed away from us 1 year and 1 day ago. Doug Wright, who served Mayor Feinstein helping oversee Muni, and then served Mayor Agnos as his deputy secretary, his deputy mayor for transportation. This is part of Doug's legacy. Lillian Hames, his widow, is with us. I hope you'll all give her a round of applause as well. Another important influence for the E-Line that many people don't know about is Mimi Silbert, the president of Delancey Street Foundation. Mimi is the one who got these tracks put in to connect the F line up there with the N and T lines to the south. Without this connection, the E-Line could have never taken place. And even though implementation was years in the future, she knew that if we didn't do it then, it wouldn't get done. So she lobbied City Hall really strongly and effectively, as Mimi always does. She can't be here today, but I'd like a hand for Mimi Silbert as well. Delancey Street is a gift to our city. Now, the original vision for the E-Line that Mayor Feinstein and Doug Wright promulgated in 1979 was to go all the way through Fisherman's Wharf and continue to Fort Mason. The E-line's been a dream for a long time. And it would connect the national parkland of Fort Mason, provide easy access, walking access, bicycle access to the Presidio, and serve all the arts and nonprofit organizations that were at Fort Mason. The past director of Fort Mason Center, Alex Whistler, is here. Alex, put your hand up. Alex was a guiding light in reviving this idea, along with Al Bakari of the Fisherman's Wharf Association at the time, and they're the ones who helped get the National Park Service to do an environmental impact study, which is now done, not paid for by the city, paid for by the feds, with some help from then Speaker Pelosi's office. And so we're ready to engineer and fund that as soon as we can move through the remaining hurdles. So Senator Feinstein has pledged her help for that, and we really hope that the city family can come together now and make that a reality as well. The Fort Mason extension will make the E-line longer, and it will make it stronger. When she was mayor, Dianne Feinstein's support made the first historic streetcar service possible in the 1980s. I remember vividly being in her office as a kind of wet behind the ears volunteer, and I said, Madam Mayor, can we do this? And she said, I'll do it, but I don't want to see any junk out there. Dianne had and still does, had very high standards of aesthetics, and so we knew that every streetcar had to be beautiful, had to be maintained at a standard that was authentic to its history and reflected well on our city. She loved to see the original Muni streetcars, including Muni's very first streetcar that the mayor himself has piloted for the Muni Centennial. They still run, and that's a blessing. She also loved the streetcars from around the world, and she loved the boat tram we got, the open-top canoe-shaped boat tram we got from Blackpool, England, way back in the 1980s. She loved to drive that car, and she actually did drive it several times. Well, today, besides opening the E-line, we are here to double our pleasure. Market Street Railway has acquired a second boat tram from Blackpool, England, and we donated it to Muni. We rode up from AT&T Park to start it. It's its first official run with passengers, and it still has its original signs right there reading Pleasure Beach via Promenade. Well, we don't have a Pleasure Beach yet, but we do have a promenade, and the promenade is the Embarcadero. And so Muni's shop workers, and I want to do a shout out to Lee Summerlot, Mike Ellis, and the rest of the Muni maintenance team. Put your hands up, please, if you're here. And Carl Johnson, now retired from Muni, who did a great job restoring this car. We can't do this without our city workers. They're so important. The boat wouldn't have sailed our way, but for two very generous donations, which I want to acknowledge. One from the Thoresen Foundation, represented here by Michael Thoresen, who underwrote the purchase price and other associated costs of this car. Michael, put your hand up, please. And to get it here, we got a lot of help from FedEx Trade Networks, represented by Cassandra Lirio. Cassandra, put your hand up. I bet you didn't know that FedEx ships streetcars on ships across oceans, on top of all the other things they do. So we're very thankful to both of them and to everyone associated with both the boat tram and the E-line. Thank you all so very much.
Thanks, Rick. And finally, as I said before, there was really strong community demand for this, strong community leadership and advocacy to get service onto the Embarcadero. So I want to invite up a couple of community leaders, one from the north end, one from the south end, starting with John Canizero. He is a third-generation Fisherman's Wharf guy. He's also currently the president of the Fisherman's Wharf Community Benefit District. Please join me in welcoming John Canizero.
Thank you, Ed. I'd also like to thank Rick Lobster, Supervisor Christensen, former Supervisor Chu, Mayor Lee, and Senator Feinstein for helping make this possible. The Fisherman's Wharf community is extremely excited for the E-Line service to begin. As Ed mentioned, my family's been a part of the Fisherman's Wharf community for a long time, and I've watched our waterfront transform tremendously since I was young. Back then, the Embarcadero was beginning its transition from a working waterfront to the incredible mix of uses that we have today. Back then, the wharf was kind of an island. It was sandwiched between the maritime and the military, the finger piers on the Embarcadero, and Fort Mason to the west. And while people love to take the cable cars to reach us, most people, especially locals, use their cars. Today, the wharf is more popular than ever, and now we're joined by many other popular attractions along the waterfront: the Exploratorium, the ferry building, the cruise ship terminal, and AT&T Park, just to name a few. Automobiles can't handle the demand to come visit us, and that's why we rely so heavily on the F line, which has transformed travel to and from the wharf since it began 15 years ago. And we thank Senator Feinstein for her leadership on that. We want to thank her as well for the vision she had with the E-Line, connecting all the destinations I just mentioned, and taking some of the pressure off of the F line on the Northern Embarcadero. We want to thank the SFMTA for making the E-Line a reality, and we're looking forward to a full 7-day service. As Rick mentioned earlier, we also urge the City and National Park Service to move forward quickly with an extension of the streetcar to Fort Mason. Fort Mason has a great synergy with the wharf. Our past leader, Al Bakari, was responsible for reviving the plan to bring the streetcars through the historic tunnel. He saw that their conference space and their exhibitions were a natural fit with our hotels, restaurants, and attractions. We need that extension sooner rather than later. It'll be a benefit to have these attractive streetcars to the Cannery, Ghirardelli Square, Aquatic Park, the Hyde Street historic ships, the Municipal Pier, and of course, Fort Mason. And we hope that everyone here will join in supporting it. Thank you.
Thanks, John. And representing the southern end, we're pleased to be joined by Katie Liddell, who is the president of the South Beach, Rincon Hill, Mission Bay Association. Katie's been a leading voice in unifying this part of the city to work constructively with us in government and other organizations to improve quality of life here. A big focus on transportation. I've spent many evenings down at Pier 40 where the group has its meetings, and she's been really a great advocate, a great supporter, a critic when need be, but a great partner for us for improving things in this part of town. So please join me in welcoming Katie Liddell.
Good morning, neighbors. I see a lot of familiar faces out there. I am so excited to be here on behalf of the South Beach Rincon Mission Bay Neighborhood Association to welcome the E-Line. Finally, a group of us here in the neighborhood have been advocating for this E-Line for a number of years, so this is a very special day for those of us who live here. So thank you, Mayor Lee, Director Riskin. Thank you, Rick Lobsher and Bruce Agate of Market Street Railway. Our eastern neighborhoods, if you're not familiar with them, going south, we're the most dynamic part of the city. We're adding new residents and businesses every single day, but the transportation options have not kept pace. So we are so excited to have the E-Line, along with improved bus service in Mission Bay and east of 2nd Street. But now, we need to look to the future and make sure that the E-Line gets extended to both Fort Mason and to Dogpatch. Thank you.
Well, thank you, everyone. I just want to close by acknowledging the many people within the SFMTA who've been working not just to make this day an event happen, but to get the E-Line service up and running and to provide Muni service every day. So I want to acknowledge John Haley, our transit director, and his staff, particularly Lee Summerlot, Ed Cobean, and Julie Kirschbaum. I want to acknowledge our communications director, Candace Sue, and her staff, really responsible for putting this together, making sure our riders understand how to use the new E-Line. I see we're joined by Barry Chown, our rail training director, who had the difficult task of getting operators trained adequately, safely, and quickly enough, from our safety folks to our capital construction folks, a lot of folks working together to make this happen. So thanks everybody for coming out today. 10 a.m. tomorrow, we start weekend service. It'll be running 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. from weekends from this point forward. Next year, as you heard people call for, extending to 7-day service. So we're really excited to be at this milestone today. And thanks everyone for coming out. We're going to cut a ribbon and then service starts 10 a.m. tomorrow. Thank you.
We may have fewer scissors, so you might have to share. Also want to acknowledge one last time that our board chair, Bruce Agate, is serving his city on jury duty today. He really wanted to be here. So this is all for him. He played a huge role in this, and we really appreciate it.